Hello and welcome. We're glad you're able to join us. With us today is Katie Schwintek, Campus Registrar at Penn State York. Katie will talk about supporting transcript evaluators, what to know to be successful. But before we get started, I would like to remind everyone that today's webinar recording will be available on our webinar page within 24 hours. Please feel free to turn on closed captions. And last thing, but very important, please post your questions using the Q&A feature. Your questions can be asked at any time, and you can ask anonymously. Katie will take 20 minutes at the end, towards the end, to answer all of your questions. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to Katie. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Belma. Hi, my name is Katie Schwintek, and I am here to present the Supporting Transcript Evaluators webinar. So first and foremost, thank you for your time today. I'm very excited to present this to you and to chat about transcript evaluation and articulation and the very important role that it plays in the transfer student success process. So appreciate your time. Glad you're here. There will be a chance at the end to ask questions and have a little bit of conversation. So if I'm talking about something throughout this webinar that you want more information about, or you have an idea for a best practice, or you have a question or a follow-up, feel free to pop it in the Q&A. And then, like Belma mentioned, we have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end where we will go over some of those. So I'm excited to wrap it up at the end with some conversation with all of the attendees. So without further ado, let's get started on supporting transcript evaluators and what they need to know to be successful. So a little background on me. I'm currently the campus registrar at Penn State York. I've been in higher ed for 18 years now and spent half of that in admissions and the other half in the registrar world. So very fortunate to be in both worlds and have experience doing both. Very passionate about transfer articulation and transfer students. I spent part of my admissions career doing admissions in the transfer world. So I kind of understood the recruitment aspect, and then spent almost 9 years as a transcript evaluator for a small private liberal arts college in York, Pennsylvania. So this is a thing that is very near and dear to my heart, something that I will talk endlessly with anybody that will listen about transfer articulation and the importance of having good policy and good procedure and good articulation that will then result in the outcome of a successful outcome for transfer students. I'm a transfer student myself, so I think that's why I'm so passionate about it. I went 1 year somewhere, didn't like it, transferred, all my credits transferred, and I was able to graduate in 4 years. So it's something that's, like I said, very important to me. So hello, greetings. And then let's get started on some learning outcomes. So this is what I hope to go over with you today. I want to kind of build a knowledge base about what is the essential pieces of the transcript evaluator, how to read a transcript, because as we know, every one of them is different, and what are the essential pieces that we need to pick out when we're looking at a transcript, how to read course descriptions, how to use technology to your benefit when you are working in transfer articulation, and then how to kind of use the transfer world as a great way to network, a great way to use it as professional development in your career. So a couple little achievement learning outcomes that we're hoping for. But first up, I want to share with you a list of what we're going to go over. So this webinar was developed over years of me thinking about, what do I need to know to be successful? I went from an admissions world into transfer articulation and had to make an adjustment very quickly in figuring out how things transferred and working with faculty to figure out where it was going to fit in the degree process and so on and so forth. So as I was going through learning those things, and sometimes you learn them quickly and sometimes you learn them through lots of experience and a networking with people and learning how other people do things. This is how I developed this list of things that I think are important for the transcript evaluator to know. So The first thing that I want to go over is types of credit, but this is the entire list for you to see. And then from there, we can kind of go one by one, and at the end we'll recap with the top 10 list. So let's jump right in with knowing types of credit. So first and foremost, as a transcript evaluator, you're going to be given a bunch of information, and you have to disseminate from there what to do with it. And all of the different types of credit is going to vary based on the student's experience, where you're working, and how it articulates into credit, and all the different types of experiences the student is bringing with them. So this is a list. Feel free to screenshot it or go back and review the recording of the webinar. So I won't go through it one by one, but this is a good overview of what kind of credit you could potentially see as a transfer evaluator. Numbering systems is a very important thing to think about when you are looking at a transcript, looking at what lower level credit versus upper level credit looks like, graduate versus undergraduate. Continuing ed, right? What are you going to do with somebody that has any type of experience or continuing ed credit? How is that equivalent to what you have offering at your institution? And then looking at things like repeated courses, institutional credit versus transfer credit. And we'll talk about this in a minute when we look at some transcripts, and we'll talk about how to differentiate between the two. Dual enrollment, study abroad, all these are partnership, right, type credits. Lived experience, credit for life experience, credit for prior knowledge. That is also very, very important to see and to know about, and to figure out how it's going to go into credit, military credit, and then credit by exam. So again, this is a list of what type of credit you could potentially be getting when you're looking at transcript evaluation. The idea here is that as we move along in the different things you need to know, these are the types of things that you have to think about when we are looking at transcripts, when we are looking at ways to articulate credit. So it looks like a long list now, but we're actually going to take it and use it in practice when we continue on with the slides. So let's look at number 2, which is components of the credit or of the transcript. So I remember my first couple weeks as a transcript evaluator, I remember looking at transcripts and thinking, I have no idea what to do with these. They all look so different. And you usually have a stack of them, right? Because they come in bundles. I was familiar with my transcript. I was familiar with transcripts I saw as they were coming in the door and being processed in the admissions processing area. So now I'm holding transcripts, and I'm responsible in this new role that I had to figure out how it was going to equate to credit. And everybody turned in a different transcript, right? So it's not like I'm seeing the same things over and over again. But then I realized I'm seeing the same things over and over again, but I'm seeing them in like different packages. I'm seeing the essentials of what I need. It just looks different with every single institution, kind of formatting it differently. So what I quickly realized were there patterns I could pick up on that were components of a transcript that I would like key into so that you know exactly what you're looking at and how you're going to then take that and use it, right? So each transcript is different, but every transcript is kind of the same in that you're looking for things like what terms they have, what their grading scale is, what their credit hours, are they semester or quarter? What's their course numbering system look like? Because that's going to influence the course numbering that you look at versus lower level or higher level. Do they differentiate gen ed courses versus major courses? Is that helpful in what you do, or do you need that information? Looking at transfer credit that might be posted on a transcript. Do they have a degree, and does that change how you articulate credit? And then looking at overall academic performance, like the GPA. It's all there. It just looks, again, different at every institution and what their transcript looks like. So one of the pieces that's important to know is that the components need to be picked out of the transcript so you can tell what to do with it next. So I want to show you an example of what I mean by that. So this is a transcript, electronic transcript. It's an official transcript, but I highlighted a couple things that we just talked about. First being the degree, right? You can see in the top left corner, I have circled that this transcript shows that somebody's awarded a degree. So how does that change, if anything? How does that change how you articulate the credit? Second circle down shows that this individual has credit from another institution, and the institution is noted there. So as a transcript evaluator, as you are looking at the full package of the student, there should hopefully be an additional transcript, right, from the institution noted on here. So you can give them additional credit that is not listed on here. And another important thing is that institutions list transfer credit differently. So the example you have here, you can see it's just listed the name of the school and how many transfer credits this individual got. I've seen transcripts where it has the name of the school and all of the credits that that institution brought in. So that's going to change, right, based on the transcript that you're looking at. I also noted the official transcript over here, and we'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about the importance of having policy and the importance of following policy. But what is your institution doing with unofficials? Or do you need a transcript that explicitly says official transcript? If you do, you need to find that right on the transcript. When you're evaluating the transcript, you need to make sure that that is noted. And then circle the GPA, quality hours, points, all of that we just noted as an important component of the transcript. If you're looking for a transcript with the registrar's seal and signature, I indicated that at the bottom. And then just as a kind of FYI, a lot of the official transcripts from electronic transcripts are noting that it was processed through an electronic transcript service, which is helpful because especially if you will take them officially that way, it's nice to know that it was ordered correctly and appropriately through an electronic transfer service. So just a couple examples of what I just mentioned in the previous slide to kind of see it in reality. And for those of you who work in this field every day, this is just one of, thousands of examples you can see, but it's kind of nice to visually see what we're talking about. Another example here, totally different format, right? So same kind of idea that you have a transcript with credit, but it looks different. So the components might be laid out a little differently, but you have the same information in front of you. You can see in the top left, there's an indication that says issued directly to the student. This example, just to kind of give you a background, this was received in a sealed envelope. So where I would work, that would be considered official in my field, or in my within my policy, as long as it was sealed. But there's a note that says issued directly to students. So what does your institution do if there's a transcript that is issued that way? That's up for you to decide, but it's important to know what the policy and procedure would be at your institution. So just another example of what a transcript could look like with the components that we just talked about. Third example and last example here for item number 2 is a graduate transcript. So indicating graduate versus undergraduate credit is important because your institution might articulate the credit differently. You might be under different accreditation rules when you're looking at how credit is articulated. So top left, you can see it says the transcript type is graduate. So important to know, right? Important to kind of get your eyes on that and see it. Same information that we talked about, laid out differently. Again, you can see you have attempted credits, earned credits, you have the semesters indicated at the bottom, you have the degree awarded, you have the quality points, you have the GPA. It's all there. It's just in a different spot than we saw before, where it's at the top in one area. Now all the information's at the bottom in another. So just a quick example for you. This is my transcript from graduate school, so spoiler alert, it's mine that I used. So just so you know, there's different ways and different ways to display all the important information that you need. So here's a helpful hint, and I have a couple of these kind of spread out throughout the webinar that goes over just things to keep in mind as you're going over components of a transcript. So my helpful hint here is 1, always read the back of the transcript. And I say back of transcript, because in quotations, because we don't typically have the like flip over anymore. A lot of stuff is coming electronically, so we're seeing it on screen versus actually flipping it over and having it in your hand. So the back of the transcript, the page 2 or page 3, is really helpful because it's going to give you a lot of information related to the institution you're evaluating. And I'll show you a couple examples in a second. But that's important information. There's going to be a key in some way that's going to probably answer a lot of questions that you have. What does this grade look like? Why is this indicator on this transcript? What does this letter mean, right? There's things that you could potentially come across that just kind of gives you pause for a second, and the key of the transcript might be a helpful place to go. My second helpful hint is reach out to the institution. If you're looking at a transcript and you are just kind of lost in what something means and you can't find it through the research you're doing, either on the key or maybe some research online, you will find that just picking up the phone or sending an email to that institution, just asking for clarification points, is going to be really helpful to you. Some of the best conversations I've had and some colleagues that I've actually met over the phone and then meet in person at different professional development events have been through phone calls that happen this way. Either ones that I've received asking about the transcript at the school that I represented at the time, or me picking up the phone and calling another institution and connecting with someone in the registrar's office or records office to ask a couple questions. So definitely use that as a networking opportunity and get more information, because it's going to be helpful in the long run. And you learn more, right? As you get this information and you start to clarify some points, you'll learn some things, and that's really helpful. So let's look at the back of a transcript. You'll see a couple things that I highlighted for you. The institution's official names. This is something that's come up more and more, is that institutions have been changing names or merging together, and then new names come from those mergers. So typically the transcript key will indicate prior names. And this is helpful when a transfer student says, I went to the X school, and you're looking at a transcript that doesn't have that name on it, right? And so then they can connect the dots for you, and you can look on the back and say, oh yes, I see, this used to be called this institution, and now it's called this institution. So you know you're looking at the correct transcript, it just has a different name. And I graduated from a school that changed their name, and I still refer to it as the first name and not the current name. So sometimes transfer students just roll off their tongue where they attended when they were there. And so it's really just an honest mistake of what's currently being called. Accreditation policies are here. We'll talk about that in a little bit, about how accreditation can guide a lot of your policies. But it's important to know, especially if your articulation roles are guided by certain types of accreditation, and who the accrediting bodies are, and then what that means for how you're going to equate credit. Grading system is important, especially if you bring grades over, or you're looking to see what the grade minimum is to transfer the credit in. You want to make sure that you have that good to go, and you understand that institution's grading policy. Different information about their academic policies, release of information, course designation, right? These are all things that are helpful to see, to learn a little bit more about that institution. And it's all, included as part of the transcript that you get. So just again, another example of what in a transcript key, the back, quote unquote, back of a transcript could look like. And then here's the back of my graduate transcript, again, using my personal transcript to show you the same information is on here, but it looks different, right? Because again, back to that overarching theme of everything is there, but it just looks different at every institution. So we've got the accreditation information, we know the grading scale, we've got some helpful academic information on here, we understand what different indicators mean. And then at the very bottom, nicely enough, they have contact information. If you have questions about this transcript, feel free to reach out, and then they tell us what exactly, where exactly to go if you have questions. So very helpful if you want to pick up the phone or send an email to get clarifying points. So back of the transcript. So part 2 of that, but number 3 on the list here is, so I say part 2 because it kind of just keeps going with that theme, is once you have a transcript, right, you have the course information in front of you, now you have to start looking into course descriptions and figuring out how you're going to articulate this credit. So the next step after looking at the credit is often accessing course descriptions and finding out how they're going to equate to courses at your institution and areas of subject areas at your institution. So a couple things to know about course descriptions to kind of keep in mind. Every course description looks a little different. Are you noticing the theme here, right? Every transcript looks a little different. Every course description looks a little different. You will find varying levels of content, varying levels of details about a course. The lengths of them could be different. And I'll show you a couple examples in a second, but there are times when I've had course descriptions that are paragraphs long, and then I've seen course descriptions that are a sentence, one sentence, and then doesn't even tell me how many credits the course is worth, right? So it varies in what I'm looking at. It's important when you're looking at course descriptions to understand what your institution is looking for when you're reading a course description. So thinking about how much of the course description can I use to determine credit? At what point do I need to ask for more information, which typically means getting a syllabi or syllabus to look at how it's going to equate to credit? And then what are the guiding principles for you making that call or you helping somebody make that call on whether you can decide it or whether you need more information from the student? And you'll see this idea of institution policy coming up as we get more and more detail of this process, but it's really, you're going to start hearing me say, what's your institution's policy, right? So it could be different from institution to institution, but having a policy is important here. So what does your institution need? And then what is in your policy that's going to drive your decision making? So is it somebody saying, I need the following key concepts to be covered? Or is somebody saying, I need at least a 70% match, which is best practice recommendation, to have at least 70% of the course content to match your institutions. It could, you could be more, your institution sets that content match policy, but what are you looking for? What's the level of the course? So are we looking at developmental level? Are we looking at undergraduate, graduate? What type of course description am I looking at? What are the required prerequisites for that course? If that's included in the course description, sometimes it's not. But if it is that going to help you decide how that's going to be equivalent to credit at your institution? And then finally, what's the total amount of time or hours that the student has been in this course? And then what does that mean for your institution? If it's not the same amount of hours, if that does not equal what you're trying to articulate it to, how does that change how you're going to articulate the credit? So a couple things to keep in mind, but I do want to show you some course descriptions. So this is a course description for, Intro to American Government, something that I think we see on pretty much any transcript in some way, shape, or form. Very, very quick and to the point, right? American government, introduction to the major tenets of the American political system. Boom, 3 credits. Looks like they might have some G3, and that might be an indicator for a gen ed, but very short and sweet, right? Versus the same course that could be equivalent, but much more information, right? A paragraph worth of information. It gives me the same credit. It gives me the course number, the title, everything, but I'm learning specifics about what this course covered. So that's the varying levels of course descriptions you could get. And you can get even more. I'm sure there's American government course descriptions that have paragraphs of information. But you might be in a position where if you are looking at GOVT 111 at an institution and you say, okay, American political system is great, I need to know what was covered, right? That might be a point in which you say, I'm going to need the syllabus for this course. Versus the other course, the American Government 170, where enough of the overall topics that were covered is enough for you to say, okay, this is equivalent to our American government. So you can kind of see the difference there and where it's coming from, and then what additional information you might need to make a good decision. Here's a great example from a catalog that actually breaks out what the course description information means. So in like a key to a transcript, they actually give in their catalog the key to their course description. They're actually breaking it down going, this is our subject code, this is our number, course number code, this is our title, this is what 3 means, number of credits, right? If there was a course indicator of gen ed, or if it satisfied a certain degree requirement, they give you a lot of information about it, which is really nice. You find this information out by using the institution's catalog as a resource for you as the transcript articulator. So anything out there that you can use as your guide to help you be a good articulator, definitely use it. I know it can seem time consuming when you are doing this work over and over again, but it's definitely going to add to your toolkit of resources that you have. And you will get to a point where you become so familiar with a transcript, even though it varies, or a course description, that things will, I think, just come naturally for you because you put in the time and the work just to kind of investigate and learn things about institutions and the way that they give you the information or how to access the resources, which is another key we will talk about in a little bit. So information about that. Let's look at number 4. And as we're kind of going through these processes, I'm starting with like the technical stuff at the beginning of like, what do you need to know? Where do you need to look? But now we're looking kind of more broadly at how the articulation policy at your institution is going to guide what you do with that information. So number 4 in the top 10 things you need to know is knowing your policy, how it's going to guide articulation, and where you as the transcript evaluator fit in all of that. That's really important to know because it's going to change at every institution, and it's going to change as you go through the experience of knowing and learning the job and becoming very familiar in your ability to do it. So the evaluator role within your institution, I mean, I will tell you, it's very important, right? We all know that. We know that the person that makes these decisions of where things articulate and where they go to complete your degree is absolutely essential. You need to know where that fits in the overall process, right? Where is it happening physically? Where is it happening at your institution? Who are you reporting to? What office is doing it? And then in the cycle of the transfer student experience, where is that happening? Is it happening early on? Is it happening after acceptance, after deposit? Or at what point is all of the details coming out? That matters, right? So knowing your institution's policy on all of that is going to indicate, or it's going to influence these things: your role, the curriculum at your institution, the components of the degree that you're trying to find where the best fit is going to be for the transfer credit the student's bringing in, how it's going to help with general articulation or articulation of the gen ed program, and then how it's all going to be influenced by your credit. So those are really important things to know at your institution. But we're gonna build a little bit on that institutional policy thing because it's really, really important to know these things. So I always say, when I've done this webinar once before, I've said, screenshot this, screen grab it, right? Do what you can. Take a picture with your cell phone because you can take that list and then go back and look at your transfer policy and see if these things are addressed. And if they are, great. If they are, but they need some fine tuning, great. If they're not, great, that's okay, because then here's an opportunity, right? Here's a great opportunity for you to take what might be missing from your articulation policy and find out what's best for your institution and put it into the institutional policy. So things that are important in your transfer policy would be things like accreditation. Are you looking for a certain type of accreditation from an institution? Do you have accrediting bodies that require that you only bring in a certain amount of credits towards a degree? What equals a match? What makes something equivalent? If there's ever a point in which you have to show a student a policy, you want to say, this is what our policy is. What equals a match is that 70% of the content matches, right? You want to be able to show a student or a student's parent or whoever's concerned, right, about an articulation decision, this is our policy. Who in the process decides what's equivalent? What does that process look like? What does the official evaluation actually look like? Are they getting it in the mail? Are they getting an email? Are they instructed to log in online and look at articulation, accreditation, or articulation decisions online? Who is in charge of informing the student about that process? It could be happening and it could be delivered in a timely manner, but if it's not told to the student, like, hey, this is ready to go, please check it out, it's kind of getting lost, right? It's just happening in the background and students aren't knowing about it. So who's responsible for not only doing it, but informing the student about it? Transfer credit limit. Is there a limit? Do you have a limit? Do you need a limit of our institution only brings in X number of credits, everything else has to be done here? Does that change whether you're an associate's, bachelor's, graduate program? It could. I don't know. Yeah, these are institution's decision. Do you have a limit in gen ed? Some states say that in order to graduate from an institution in their state, you have to have a certain percentage of the gen ed done at that institution. So what does that look like for your institution? And can transfer credit come in place, or do you have to cap that? If you do, put it in writing, right? Have a policy in writing. Do you have a residency requirement? Is there a certain amount of credits that need to be done at your institution? Do they have to be done in their last few semesters, or is it just overall percentage of their degree has to be done there? It's good to know the difference and have that in policy. And then the last one, which sometimes is the uncomfortable conversation to have, which is, are these policies and procedures, so not only what the policy is, but what procedure you're going through to get this information done and to the student, is it benefiting the student? Is it the best policy you have for student success? The answer could be yes, and that's great. But the answer could also be, I think there's a couple of things we could do. I think there's a couple pieces of fine tuning that we can do, or there's a couple areas here where we don't actually have anything in writing, and it would be really helpful to have formal procedure written, so and formal policy in place. So an opportunity here to just review, right? Just go over the stuff that you currently have in place and look for any gaps that you could potentially fill in some policies. Helpful hints, just a real quick kind of differentiating the two. So policy is what's going to guide your institution's rules for articulation, but the procedure is the mechanism in which you do that, so you support the policy and getting it done. But also, and I put in parentheses, but it's important, is how you enforce the policy, right? What are you doing to ensure that you are following your institution's articulation policy? So policies and procedures are very important here. So they go hand in hand when it comes to transfer articulation. Okay, moving on to number 5. So technology is your friend. Technology is your transfer articulation friend. And as I've been presenting, I'm seeing the Q&A and chat popping up, and I saw a couple notes about tests and some articulation technology that you can use to there's great pieces of technology from many companies that build an articulation database for you. A lot of student information systems have articulation databases built in because they understand the importance of transfer credit. I mean, a lot of people are bringing credit with them in some way, shape, or form. So it's important to understand that technology can benefit you, and you can use it to not only streamline some process, but help your institution have an overall better experience, not only for you as the person doing the job, but maybe also for the transfer student that's experiencing the end product, which is the delivery of the transfer information. So looking at your database, what does that look like for you? Do you have a database where you can continuously articulate credit in the system and have it on a rolling basis? And then what does the training look like for the individuals that are actually doing that work? So how do you train them in the database and show them how to use it? Look at the capabilities of your student information system. You could have articulation modules that you might not be using. So maybe contacting your provider and seeing what is available to you. And then certainly using databases that could be available to you. I know that when I did this work at the small private liberal arts college that I worked for, college source catalog searches were my friend, because there was a grouping of transcripts I got all the time from the institutions that were local to us. But there were a lot of times I got transcripts from places I'd never heard of. So on to College Source I went and was able to find catalogs and start searching for them. So there's definitely things out there that will help you. And I recommend, if you are in the market for looking at ways to use technology, you should absolutely do it, because it will make your life easier and then ultimately be a better product for the student. So I have a little screenshot of my College Source online database. So if you use the catalog search, you're going to be very familiar with what this home screen looks like. But just an example of a place where you can go and you can literally start typing in the institution, and it brings up great information about the institution, who their accreditors are, what their program accreditation looks like, and then a whole area that goes over all of their different PDF catalogs. So very helpful information. So a little shout out to College Source and their database. Catalog search is awesome. All right, moving right along. So looking at number 6 is understanding how FERPA fits within the transfer articulation process. So FERPA is not a new term, right? We've heard that word over and over again, but understanding how you apply the FERPA rules and regulations to transfer credit. And usually this comes in the form of answering degree-specific questions to family and friends and the student themselves that are asking questions about the information they're receiving. So how is FERPA's role in that going to play out when there are legitimate questions about how it's going to work? So know your institution's policy, right? Know your institution's FERPA policy. What they decide is directory information is just good to know in general, but then understand how that's going to influence what you're going to be saying and who you're going to be saying it to, and at what point you need third-party disclosures in order to have conversations with people that are involved in the transfer students process and have good questions. FERPA resources on ACRO's page are plentiful. There's a lot of great information on there. They have great resources. So just a little screenshot of their homepage where you can find some really good information and just kind of learn a little bit more about how this works in practice. Number 7, so how to explain what you do. So I always tell a quick story where when I worked at the institution where I did articulation, my title was Associate Registrar of Transfer Articulation. So we all knew what that meant, but my husband didn't. I would say what I did, right? But he knew like bits and pieces. So I would hear people say like, oh, what does your wife do? And I would kind of like lean in and say, or kind of lean in and listen, like, I wonder how he's going to explain to somebody what I do. That's going to be interesting, right? And that kind of is what we're charged with, right? Because somebody hears that you're a transfer articulation specialist, right? And they'll go, what does that mean? What do you do, right? And then you have to articulate it to somebody, right? You have to say to somebody what that is. So what the reason why this is important as an important part of the process is that you have to be able to explain to somebody the importance of your role, because it's so very important. That part of the process is so important. So a couple key points here: utilize your job description, right? Because it's going to be in there in some way, shape, or form, what exactly you are doing and what you're charged with doing, what they're paying you to do, right? But then also explain it in terms that the students will understand, that faculty will understand, in terms that how your job function relates to the mission of the institution or the mission of your office or the overall goal in student transfer success. Like, where is your piece of the pie? And maybe explaining it on that level is going to be enough to like explain it out to the audience that you're talking to. It could vary based on the audience you're talking to, right? Explain to a parent how the important part you play in the child's transfer articulation process is much different than if you're having a conversation with engineering faculty, right? And you're trying to advocate for credit coming in as equivalency credit. And you're trying to explain, like, well, this is what I do every day. I see this stuff. Let me show you resources we can look at, right? So the level and how you talk about it is going to be different. But the key is being able to link the two. So whoever you're talking to, whatever your audience is telling them the importance of your role. Ultimately, it's in the deliverable of the student success piece, right? It's that we're trying to fairly give credit to students that have credit, right? And the credit doesn't mean transcripted credit. It means credit for prior learning. It means credit for experience. And it could also mean transcripted credit. But when I talk about giving credit, I mean in the holistic, the whole thing. Like, what are we looking at as far as giving equivalency credit? And how are you going to explain that to somebody who asks you, what do you do, right? What's your part in this? And you're able to articulate that well. So know your role. It's very important, but be able to explain it out if you're ever in the situation where you need to show how essential you are. And then take that into number 8, which is building relationships with the people that you are working with. And I have a list here of key stakeholders that are important. The important point here, though, is that you have to use those really incredible interpersonal communication skills. You have to treat it like a partnership because they are your partners, right? They're going to be the ones that you go to with questions. They're going to be the ones you go to advocate for a student. They're going to be the ones that you go to get funding for something. Funding for technology is a great example. If you see a point in which you can use technology, but you need to then go purchase it, budgets are tight. You have to be able to explain to somebody why it's important. When you have those relationships and you've earned trust and you have shown that you know what you're doing and that this piece is going to be very important to help you, those relationships are going to benefit you. So looking at, students are obviously our number one stakeholder here, right? But we have very close second, thirds, and fourths, and so on that are going to be helpful for us. So looking at who your supervisor is, where you fit within the college or university structure, what department chairs or deans do you need to connect with and have a good relationship with? Who are your colleagues in your office that may not do your job, but they're there helping you do pieces of your job or helping support you in some way? Those are all going to be great relationships that will help you, and vice versa, right? You can help them in many ways in your role. So it's going to be worth the time to put in to build those strong relationships. And sometimes it's working together on committees or projects, and sometimes it's really just, connecting with people on a human level and establishing that relationship so that when you do have to turn to a dean, for example, and advocate for a student to get credit, you feel very comfortable to pick up the phone and call that individual and say, look, I need to chat with you about something. I feel differently than what actually happened with this credit. Here's why, and go from there. So those relationships and those partnerships that you make with the people at your institution and outside your institution too, right? Because this is a large network of people. Those are going to be so valuable to you as the transcript evaluator. All right, so looking at number 9, so a lot of what we do, I think, feels like, can kind of feel like lockstep. Like, okay, I get a transcript. Okay, I got to pull up the course descriptions. I got to check and see if it's already been articulated in the database. Oh, it has, great. When was it updated? Okay, let me make the equivalency credit. And that, you kind of go right down the process, right? But what's actually really cool about being the transcript evaluator and how much you have at your institution, how much flexibility you have, you can be pretty creative in your role, and you can earn trust from people to show how creative you can be, right? So it might not happen right out of the gate. So if you're brand new to this role, that might not be something that happens tomorrow. But as you establish yourself, you might have the ability to say, okay, let me see how I can do this a little differently, or let me see how I can be a little creative here and make some adjustments, or let me see what I can learn somewhere else and apply it to what we're doing here. So the way we do that is we just use good critical thinking and critical listening skills. We ask good questions. We network with amazing colleagues and peers that maybe do things differently that you could learn something from and make some adjustments, or when somebody reaches out to you for advice, you're able to give that to them and then they can make some adjustments. So you're looking at thinking about in the big picture, yes, it feels like boom, 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 but where are the areas that I can be a little flexible? Where is the areas that I might not be assigning credit for credit, but I can take a lived experience and say that it can equate this part of gen ed or this upper level degree requirement in the major, right? So there's ways in which we can think outside the box and say, okay, this isn't American government for American government. I served in the military for 25 years and I had 4 tours in Iraq, are we going to require this person to take culture of the Middle East, which is the situation I dealt with very early on in my articulation career, where when I told the student they had to take Intro to Middle East, they looked at me like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do that, right? And rightfully so. And I was like, okay, we're gonna go back and we're gonna relook at this. And they were able to get the credit for it. They did not have to take it because he jokingly said to me, I could probably teach that course, right? Because he's had the experience. So where can we be creative? Where can we take somebody's experience and say, this is an area you don't have to fulfill anymore? And then what does that look like, right? Looking at policy that's guiding your institution, looking at procedure and how we do it. How can we be creative? So definitely good to think about how student success is going to be impacted by your creativity, because there are definitely ways and pockets in which you can do that. So a couple helpful hints here. Use your advocates on campus that can help you be creative, right? You're going to have relationships that you build with people that are going to be helpful for you, that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I have a crazy idea. Let me just bounce it off of you. Let's not let this military guy have to take a Middle East cultures class. He's served in the military for 25 years, right? Like, let me just run this idea by you. And that gen ed coordinator could be your friend and say, absolutely, or be your advocate, right? And say, absolutely, tell me more, show me some documentation. I'm happy to have this conversation with you. So have good advocates on campus that you can go to, and just constantly be looking at ways in which you can improve, right? Because that's just going to help the student overall. Okay. So we are at number 10, and we do have a little bit of time for questions. Number 10 is know your external resources. So you have all these things happening on a daily basis in your articulation world, and you have stacks of transcripts and students needing to know information and questions, right? So sometimes it can feel very much within the four walls of your office. But there are tons of external resources that can help you. So you're not alone. You can tell there's, over 200 people, right, that are attending this webinar. There's people out there that do this job. So network with people, attend professional development opportunities, right? Look at your state guidelines, look at your accrediting guidelines. Get on listservs. ACRO has an amazing transfer listserv that you can connect with people that are in your world, but might be across the country, right? But has the same question you have or experiencing the same situation you have. So get yourself connected with those publications and those professional networks that are really going to help. That is going to add so much value to your work and what you're doing, and just to you professionally, right? You can benefit from other people and people can benefit from you. So get connected with those professional development opportunities. Also, if I can give a quick shout out to you, in a couple of weeks, if you get the ACRO news, this is coming up, but there's an amazing virtual summit called the Technology and Transfer Summit. It's happened several summers in a row, and it does this awesome presentation of both technology and transfer and best practices and good resources and excellent colleagues that are in these two worlds. It's coming up in a couple weeks. So July 9th through 11th, you will see it's out there, but feel free to Google it. If you're not registered, I highly recommend you attend this summit. It's a fantastic, fantastic conference and professional development opportunity. So just a quick plug there for the virtual technology and transfer summit. So a quick recap here, just again, the same screen that you saw at the very beginning of this webinar. It goes over the 10 things that every transcript evaluator should know, looking at details from credit to transcripts to keys of transcripts to knowing your policy at your institution, understanding technology and how it could potentially fit into what you do at your institution, building those key relationships that are going to help you with not only students, but any key stakeholder that your institution you think could be a good partner for you, and then learn how to be creative and access those external resources that can help you do your job. So, like I said, just another quick recap of this list that we have. So we do have some time. We are at 2:50, so we have a couple minutes here at the end for conversation about anything that came up. I know the chat is very active. We're talking about I'm seeing military credit, I'm seeing ACE, I'm seeing transferology, tons of stuff. What institution do you work for? I'm loving what I'm seeing kind of in the periphery as I'm presenting. But we do have a couple Q&As that were sent in. So I'm just gonna pop over here and look at some of the institution. Anonymous. Okay, date of birth. All the transcripts I showed today were my own transcripts, actually. So, but I will take my date of birth out for future presentation. Thank you for that. Yeah, I didn't use anybody's transcript without permission. I would definitely not do that. It's my own academic records. Okay. So one individual asked, why do institutions not accept DSST? That's hard to say. It's going to be based on the institution's policy and what they've decided is best for their institution. Now, just to clarify, that doesn't mean it has to always be that way. So if you work for an institution where they're not having any, they're not allowing those types of credit to come in or be reviewed, that's something that you can maybe advocate for to be changed. Sometimes it's just educating others on what that means. Again, know your role, right? And where it fits into the overall institution. Sometimes it's really just somebody doesn't understand what it is, and you providing information could change a policy. So, yeah, I remember years and years ago, I went to a training through the American Council on Education, and they talked about the process they go through to create the joint services transcript into equivalent credit. And I remember going back to my institution and being like, this is amazing. Like you have to learn about everything that goes into the amount of review that goes into creating these JSTs. And that really opened up the conversations to make so much more equivalent from the military transcript, especially things like public speaking and American government and civilization credit that I had at that institution. So yes, if you see an institution not accepting something you think is important, I recommend you advocate and try to get that changed. So a question here, do you have any recommendation for policy formats or critical points that should be published in policy? We have policy, but it's very vague and hard to set procedure from it. Okay, that's a great point. So I would say there's no really set format other than I'm a fan of, just simple bulleted points because it's easy to show that to the constituent that you're working with, like if it's a parent or student. I would say using this list and I'm going to put my email address up here. Feel free to email me if you want, and I can just send you my slide. But what's important is to kind of have a list of what you think you need to cover and then kind of pull them up and compare both, right? So have a list of what you want to have covered and then look at your institution's policy and start to compare or see where there's places that maybe some things could be changed. But I would recommend having the policy easy to read because remember, this is something that you're gonna, if pushed for, you're going to have to present to somebody, right? So you're going to want to have it in an easy readable format, just so it's easily shareable. So that's what I would say. And then absolutely, your policy is going to inform your procedure, right? So you want to make sure that it's not too crazy and that it's hard to develop a procedure from it, right? So make sure it's clear and concise. That would be really, really great. Somebody's asking, I would like to know which schools are using OCR technology, and if so, what products? So that might be more of a general question out to the attendees as far as what technology is out there that's being used, and if so, what products. So feel free, if that's something you want to comment on, feel free to pop it in the chat, and then that individual can kind of see your answers here. Let's see here. I think that's it. I'm going to pop over to the chat real quick and see if there's anything in here. Belma, thank you for sending the link to Tech and Transfer. That's awesome. Again, please feel free to register for that. It's an incredible summit that Accurate does such a nice job. Transfer and technology professionals gathering online. It's a really awesome, awesome event. And it's virtual, so you can do it from your office. All right. All right. Oh, shout out to Terry. Hi, Terry. Oh my gosh, this is a colleague I used to work with, and she's out in the Midwest now. So it's nice to see your comment in there. Good to see you. Let's see. If there's any other questions? I don't think I'm missing anything here. All right. Yeah, I don't see any new questions. So, okay. So what I'm going to do is pop up my contact information here. And feel free if you want to screen grab that or write that down. If you would like to have any conversations, I will talk to anybody about transfer articulation, even if you have like a thought or an idea or a question. I'm just always happy to talk about it. It's something that I'm very, very passionate about. So my email, my Penn State email, my personal email is on here. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm there as well. But I want to take a second and say thank you very much for attending today. I know our time is valuable, and I know in higher ed right now we're being pulled in 50 million directions. So I know that taking an hour of your time is pretty significant. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that attends. Connect with me in any way you can. Send me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn. I would be happy to chat with anybody. I love transfer and I love this world. So with that, I will formally end the webinar. Thank you again for attending, and I hope to see you in the future.